Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Real Estate Edition of That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes a show business every Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on thatbusinessnetwork.com. My background in real estate, over 10 years in business, 1,700 plus homes sold and experienced, and many other real estate transactions as well in one capacity or another. So I'd like to be your resource for buying or selling real estate, and you don't necessarily have to be in the Tampa Bay region for me to help you. We have a vast relocation and referral network of agents across the country that we can help you with. Simply reach out to me, Jamie at TampaBayREO.com. Visit our new site, TampaBayREO.com, for all the information about this particular show, myself and my real estate business. And again, that's in addition to the show's show site at thatbusinessnetwork.com. On this segment, I want to talk a little bit about an article that was in the news recently, made its rounds around all the real estate circles. There was a couple in Florida who purchased what they thought was a condo for $478,000 at the auction, but they ended up purchasing was the HOA lien for the property. And so they did not have clear title to the property. You might be asking, how does that work? How does that happen? What happened here? So I want to take you through how HOA liens work, how condo liens work, and what you as a potential purchaser of property should be aware of, especially if you're buying homes at an auction setting. If you're buying them from the multiple listing service, through a real estate agent, through a title company, this is less likely to happen, although you should be aware of this potential. So what happens when somebody forgets, or not say forgets, but begins to miss their mortgage payments? Oftentimes they aren't going to pay the HOAs either. And for condos, that can really rack up some high delinquency bills, especially waterfront properties that have $500, $600, $700 a month fees. Downtown developments will have that. In Tampa, for instance, just any basic condominium, really no matter the neighborhood, minimum $200, and that's on the very low end of condominium fees. Average is probably more around $250 to $350 for the monthly assessments, and so those begin to add up pretty quickly. And what complicates, or what really compounds the matter, is when the attorneys get involved. So with any type of missed payment situation, you usually get about 2 months of grace period where they'll call you, but they won't necessarily bring in the attorneys. Usually after the third missed payment is when they'll bring in a collection company or an attorney. And so if you've not made your HOA or condo payments, then after the third month, they typically will send that to an attorney. Once it goes to the attorney, you can automatically add at least $500 to the bill, or maybe even up to $1,000 for legal fees. And that's usually the initial legal fees, usually a letter to you, and with the demand notices, things of that nature. But yeah, so whatever you owe, plus penalties, plus legal fees, and so you're easily up into the $1,000, a couple $1,000 range very quickly. And so from that, eventually what will happen is the HOA will lose confidence and will say, this person isn't going to be able to pay on this this lien that we have put on the property. And so they go and they foreclose on it. And so before they do that, they have to lien your property. And so the lien gives them a legal right to then foreclose on it. But keep in mind, you still have a mortgage sitting out here, and you may have multiple mortgages on the property. But the HOA is much more diligent in their process. They're not so backed up like banks have been over the past several years, to where they don't have the time to necessarily foreclose on somebody. They're involved in workout solutions, and they're not up on the ball the way an HOA is. And so an HOA will then lien the property, and you can then pay off that lien as an investor at an auction and take title to the property. But with any auction property, it's still subject to the other encumbrances against the property. And the mortgage is not necessarily wiped out by their foreclosure lien, because the mortgages weren't noticed. A foreclosure is supposed to, or will, wipe out liens and judgments against the property, with some exceptions, and it varies from state to state. In Florida, for instance, if a mortgage forecloses before the HOA does, it doesn't necessarily wipe, or it doesn't wipe out the HOA, I should say. The HOA lien is in a superposition, as they call it, and they are able to still collect on what they are owed. There is a law now in Florida that's been around for some time, whereby a bank is only required to pay the lesser of 1% of the original mortgage balance or something or another. I forget the specifics of the law, but in years past, before that was in place, the mortgage would have to pay off the entire HOA balance. But what I'm getting at here with this particular topic is that when the owners who bought the property at auction and paid $478,000 for what they thought was clear title to the property, they are paying off what was owed on the HOA lien, and that's pretty extensive. I've never seen them get as high as $478,000. But regardless, that's what they paid. Or actually, I take that back. That was probably bid up by the investors at the property, and so that's what the value of the property was worth. I should take that back. The investors that are bidding at auction are going to bid up to what they considered, fair market, wholesale value. They're not going to pay retail value in an auction setting. But that paid off the HOA's lien, no matter what it was, and the HOA said, "All right, here's title of the property." And this is what a number of different investment groups have done through the years, and it's really a gray/shady area of real estate whereby they do acquire legal title to the property, but then they move somebody into the property and they begin renting it to them. And unbeknownst to them, there is a mortgage sitting out there that can be foreclosed on at any time. So if the HOA is going to foreclose property and wants actual legal clear title to the property, they must notice the mortgage companies, but they don't notice them, so they aren't put on record, and so they have a defense in the foreclosure proceedings, and their mortgage can then foreclose and take title to the property. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. The HOA turned over title to the person who bought it at auction, but the mortgage comes around and forecloses on the unit after the fact, and they don't have clear title to the property unless they want to pay off the mortgage too, which I'm sure was another few $100,000, probably even $500,000 if they paid $470,000, probably closer even to $1 million, given that real estate values have fallen versus what they were in 2004 and 2005. So a very painful lesson that in particular a couple learned, and it can all be handled through a simple title search. Title searches cost anywhere between $100 and $200. Typically, they're going to reveal any liens on the property. They're going to reveal the mortgages on the property, and they're going to protect you, the home buyer, from this type of a situation. Now, this commonly happens also in the multiple listing service on bank foreclosed properties with these HOA liens sitting out there. This is something you as an investor probably are aware of, but if you're a first-time buyer, you're probably not going to be aware of this. When the banks take title to the property, the HOA liens in Florida are still there. Other states, they are wiped out. And so if you're in other states, I would advise you to research your laws with regard to how HOA liens stay on a property after a foreclosure in your state. But they cannot clear up the HOA lien until the certificate of title records. The certificate of title is their proof of ownership. And so after the auction, given that an investor does not pick it up at the auction and it rolls back to the plaintiff, if the mortgagee is the plaintiff in this situation, they take title to the property. But the certificate of title is the document that is recorded at the clerk of court's office that gives public notice that they are legal owner of the property. Depending on where you're at and what county in Florida here, they're supposed to put it up within a couple of weeks, but it could get delayed from months on end. Sometimes you got to call them and find out why it's not been posted, and it delays the closing because the title company is going to look into public records, and they're going to see the mortgagor, the prior owner of the property, as still the legal owner of record, although there has been a final judgment and there has been an auction and the title has passed over to the bank. And so the bank is going to want to take advantage of that law that I talked about earlier, where they only had to pay off 1% of the principal mortgage balance or the last 12 months of assessments, whichever is lower, but they cannot take advantage of that law until they are showing as legal owner of record. And there's always some but there's always some letters that go back and forth between the bank attorney and the HOA attorney, where they both, try to fight for the most money that they can, and it always will delay a closing. So if you are buying a bank-owned property that has immediately went on market and immediately sold, this is when you're going to run into this situation. If it's been on market 6 months or 3 months, 6 months, that has probably had enough time to transpire. But for when they take title to the property to actually clearing up the HOA liens, it's typically 2 to 3 month process. And so this is something that if you're buying a property, you need to be aware of. It doesn't mean they're going to stick you with the HOA liens. The banks will resolve that if they're being sold through the multiple listing service. The auction is a whole different area of investing. That's why I said you can really lose your shirt in investing in an auction if you're not paying attention, you don't understand title. So be sure that you're talking to your agent. Ask them to ask the listing agent, is the HOA cleared up on the property? Do you expect any delays in closing as a result of the HOA/condo lien that may be on the property? And again, this only applies to properties that are, again, inside homeowners associations or condominium owner associations where you have a monthly, quarterly, annually assessment, whatever the case may be. So a good way to make sure that you're going to find a property or close on time, ask those questions, and the listing agents are going to know if those HOA liens are cleared up. And again, from the time the agents take title or take control of the property to the time that the HOA liens are cleared up is usually 2 to 3 months. So be aware of those HOA liens. They are a stickler here in the state of Florida. Fortunately, over the last couple of years, that law that went into place to help the banks has actually improved the process in getting these properties moved quickly. Before that, the HOAs held their ground and wanted the full amount of assessments owed all the way back from the date that the first payment was missed. The banks dug their heels in and say, we're only offering you this. And sometimes that created legal disputes, litigation, and delayed and pretty much eliminated the possibility of closings for years on end. But regardless, pay attention to that when you're buying real estate. Keep me in mind for your next deal. If you're based here in Tampa Bay, I would love to help you out personally. But if you're in another part of the country, please reach out to me, Jamie@TampaBayREO.com, and we'll connect you with a qualified real estate professional with Coldwell Banker. Stay tuned. We got a lot more when we come back from the break on That Business Show 2.0, the real estate edition with Jamie Maloney.
Hi, welcome to Yeager's. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeager's, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products, hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
estate edition of That Business Show 2.0 with your host, Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes show business. Keep in mind, we do this show weekdays 9 a.m. through to 10 a.m. each weekday morning, and we talk with different business owners. The Thursday edition is strictly our real estate talk. So if you're finding the show on a podcast and you haven't found the regular business show, please tune into that too. We air new episodes Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on thatbusinessnetwork.com. It's also a separate podcast on iTunes. And so we got the real estate edition as one podcast, and we have the general business show as another podcast. So a lot of good content coming out of this program each and every weekday morning. And if you're a business professional out there in the community, we'd like to hear your story. We've interviewed over 1,300 different entrepreneurs and business professionals on this program. Reach out to us, tbsinterview.com, for more information on how to come onto this program, tbsinterview.com. In the last segment there, I was talking about the power of the HOAs and the power of the condos. And when I say HOA and I say condo, they're similar, but they're not similar, or they're not one and the same. So I want to clarify that and talk about what it means to buy inside a condominium association. So there's HOAs and there's COAs, homeowners associations, condominium owner associations. And so what are the differences? Homeowners associations are single family, detached, or attached housing that shares some type of common interest amongst all of the owners. In a community, it's usually the maintenance of common areas such as playgrounds and parks, and they have standards and architectural committees in place to protect the conformity of the home. And it's usually a low maintenance fee to kind of keep the order of the neighborhood. It can be high depending on how much the amenities are in the community. Like if there's a community pool, your amenities are going to be much higher. More playgrounds, more parks, more oversight, it's going to add to the fee. But compared to a condominium association, the HOA fees are always going to be lower in terms of what you get between the two. Condominium association is shared ownership. You are in a building and you are basically in business with the other unit owners. And so that's a condominium ownership association. And so with a homeowners association, you don't own the shared spaces or shared areas because your homes are detached. In the situation of a townhome where the homes are attached, there is ownership or responsibility. It's not ownership, it's responsibility of the shared walls, but the ownership of the land is per the unit. The ownership of the land in a condominium is for the entire association. So land value with a condo to you as the individual owner is zero. To somebody in a single family detached home, it can be quite high because you could tear down the home and build a new home. If it's a townhome, it's going to be fairly low because you can't easily tear down the townhome and build another one inside a development. But there is some land ownership rights with regard to a townhome. And so that's just some of the areas of law, but I don't want to go into that too much. I want to talk about what it means and questions you should be asking and what you should be aware of when you buy inside a condominium. So first off, why do people buy condos? They have monthly fees. They can be quite extensive. You don't have full ownership of the property. Condominiums are usually people that are single, young professionals, inner city situations where people are working downtown. They offer convenience. It's maintenance-free lifestyle is oftentimes how they are built. They're also in use as rental housing in lower quality areas, apartments that have been turned into condos. Investors came in during the condo flipping craze and picked those up. Many of them flipped, made money. Others of them put them into rental use. But regardless, condominiums are also commonly apartments in Tampa Bay, and in other markets they may or may not be commonplace. But in Tampa Bay, you see both inner city urban housing used for young professionals, and you also see a lot of condos put up for rent. But renting condos can be difficult because the typical rents in Tampa for central Tampa urban housing go anywhere between $600 and $900, and by the time you add a $300 and $400 a month condominium fee to what you're going to get from the rent, it really impacts your ability to make money. So it really all depends on that acquisition fee. And so that's why in Tampa, condominium prices in the lower quality areas have stayed and remained around the $40,000 to $50,000 mark, because after that, it doesn't make investing sense because there is no cash flow due to the condominium fees. From an ownership standpoint, though, condominiums can be quite attractive. You know, if you own a home, you're going to be paying lawn maintenance, you're going to be paying for the repairs on the roof, you're going to be paying repairs on anything exterior when it comes up, and it can be a situation where you're not ready for it. At least with a condominium, you're paying into a fund each and every month. They should be ready for the repairs as they come due. This is something, though, when you're buying a condo, you need to ask the questions and you need to research the financials of the community. All communities should have general operating funds, and they should have reserve funds for unforeseen situations that occur. Now, over the last 10 years in Florida, many condominiums have fallen apart. Many of them are in financial distress and do not have the funds available to even maintain the basic living expenses or amenities for the development. And I was involved in one in 2005 up until a couple of years ago. When I sold it, I kept it for many years after moving out of it as a rental property. But it was a nice condo conversion, 48 units near the University of South Florida, completely redone and renovated when I moved in 2005. Within about 3 or 4 years, the community had went through the financial crisis of 2008. The condominium investments were highly inflated, and a lot of the investors ended up just letting them go back to the bank via foreclosure. And so an investment in my situation of $86,000 turned into $15,000 of a return, or $15,000 sales price when I got rid of it years later, but that was after renting it and living in it for a couple of years. I actually bought another couple of units in that development when they were $15,000 and turned around and flipped them. So if you look at it from a dollar cost averaging standpoint, I might have, maybe broke even or something, but it was still a hard pill to swallow when you have a property go from $86,000 down to $15,000. I think today they're probably worth between $25,000 and $30,000. But what had happened in this 48 unit development is it got to the point where only 20 people or 20 units were paying, and the roof was falling apart, the sod had died, the pool needed maintained, there were electrical issues, the water bill with the city of Tampa was many months past due. It couldn't maintain its own expenses for the building, let alone anything unforeseen. So it got to the point to where when there was a roof leak, you had to pay somebody to go fix that roof, even though you were paying your assessments. And because you don't want water leaking into your house, you just had to go up there and patch it to protect your own unit. And so this is what happens when unit owners quit paying. The assessments fall into the hands of the other people through special assessments. And so that's a question that you need to ask, in addition to seeing the financials, asking about the reserves, asking about the liquidity of their balance sheet and their operating capital. But are there any special assessments or proposed special assessments that are coming up on the property? And special assessments, again, are something unforeseen that comes up that the reserves are not meant to cover. So be mindful that condos can be a nice little investment, but they can be a money trap. And right now in Tampa, they're not the greatest of investments. But in 2003, 4, and 5, it was all the craze to be in the condo flipping business. People were making money hand over fist, and they were predicting that was the next big thing in real estate for many decades to become. It became like the day traders of real estate, the condo flippers, if you can in some way equate financial stocks and bonds to housing in that capacity. So what's another reason people will buy condos? Insurance. You don't have to have property insurance on the property. The general exterior of the building is going to be maintained by your association payment, so you can save on insurance. The interior belongings and interior parts of the condominium association or condominium unit that you own will still be your responsibility. But a lot of people own a condo and have no insurance whatsoever on the property. And so it could be an opportunity for you to save some money on that, but it also opens up a risk to you as well. People like the amenities and the conformity and the rules that are in place at a condominium association. And so you have your common areas that again are shared ownership. If you look at the legal description, you're going to see that you as unit owner of whatever number that you own or whatever letter that you own, you have a certain percentage of shared ownership amongst the other people and the common areas as well. So you own a certain percentage of the pool, of the clubhouse, of the playground, whatever it is at the association, you have those common areas. Condominiums have regular meetings. I would advise if you're going to buy inside one of those, you go to the meetings. That was one of the reasons why the development that I was a part of fell apart, was because people stopped going to the meetings, and it got to the point where only a couple of people out of 48 were showing up. It wasn't even enough to have a quorum call because there were not enough voters, and even through the use of proxy voting, the people were still not participating, and so nothing was getting done. So be mindful of that and make sure that you're not buying into a death trap condominium association, because when you get to a point where the entire development can't fund itself, what happens is the units get condemned, and the state, city, county, whatever entity is in charge of that comes in, takes control of the building. They will bring the building back up to standards through taxpayer funds or county funds, city funds, whatever is allotted for that. And then they assess the units with the repair cost. And then when the unit owners can't pay, they foreclose, and then you lose your entire interest on the property. So that's basically how they hit reset on these buildings when they fall apart. And that's what I was afraid was going to happen to the development that I was in. So I just took whatever I could recover from the units that I own, and I got out. But if you're buying in units today, very important to research the financials of the development and check for any special assessments. Make sure unit owners are engaged and are paying, and the units are properly upkept, that the roof is in good shape and has reserves, that the common areas are in good shape and has reserves in the event that they need funding. So again, condominiums can be a benefit, but they can also be a huge risk as well. Don't miss those condo fees because they add up pretty quickly when they go over to the attorney's office. So again, if I can help you in any way buying or selling real estate, Jamie at TampaBayREO.com. Phone number 813-760-8516. I'd like to help you out anywhere in the country through our relocation and referral network. Again, Jamie at TampaBayREO.com.
Hi, welcome to Yeagers. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeagers, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products: hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
And welcome back to the real estate edition of That Business Show 2.0, where real estate becomes show business every Thursday at 9 a.m., thatbusinessnetwork.com. So throughout today's program, we've been talking about the risks of buying inside a condominium, the benefits of buying inside a condominium. Also at the top of the hour, talking about the couple, unfortunately, who bought a property through auction and didn't understand that they were paying for an HOA lien foreclosure instead of a mortgagee foreclosure, which would have given them a title to the property subject to the HOA lien, which would have still been out there in Florida because Florida has a super lien position. But I want to continue the discussion about condominiums. I want to talk about the contract addendum that you would use inside a contract when you purchase a condominium. So this is commonly referred to as Addendum A, the condominium rider. So I want to take people through this. Whenever you purchase a piece of property, you're going to use a standard, either an as-is contract or the standard estate contract. The difference being as-is means the seller is not going to make any repairs that are predefined in the contract. The state contract itself does have a 1.5% repair credit inside of the contract. The as-is contract takes that out. And in our market, the as-is contract is very common. That's due to the influx of REOs that we've had over the last 10 years. And a lot of realtors just got used to using the as-is contract. But when you purchase a property, make sure as a consumer you know which contract that you're using. Are you using the as-is contract, which is going to favor a seller, or are you going to use the standard estate contract, which is going to favor the buyer and has in it a default of 1.5% of the purchase price that can be used as a repair credit? Of course, that can be zeroed out, and of course that can be increased and negotiated, whatever, but that's in the contract. And if a realtor unknowingly just glosses over that page right there and doesn't put anything in there, by default you are getting a 1.5% repair credit from the seller on warranted items. And I'm not going to get into a discussion on warranted items right here, but just want to say that this addendum that I'm going to discuss here in this segment is used in conjunction with the state contract. So this is an addendum. And in our marketplace, there are about 26 or 30 different standard addendums that are pre-written by the Florida Association of Realtors, or the Florida Bar, and these are incorporated when the case permits. So the condominium rider is required on any type of purchase that is a condominium. And remember, we talked about earlier, condo is a shared form of ownership. You and all the other unit owners share ownership of the common areas, and you have 100% ownership of the interior of the unit. But common areas such as the walls, the roofs, the playgrounds, the pools, you own a percentage of that. And so people need to be aware that they are purchasing a condominium. So let's look at some of the components of the condominium rider here. So it starts with the 3-page addendum here, and in the condominium association approval, the first part here is the approval of the buyer is or is not required. More often than not, condominiums have a requirement that the buyer gets approved by the association. This is something that can derail a sale if a buyer has any type of criminal background, or some associations just have rules and regulations that are just difficult to meet, but it's not highly common in Florida. So be sure that you as a buyer or a realtor representing a buyer in the sale of a condominium checks with the association and whether or not purchase of the sale or purchase of the property is subject to approval of the buyer. Because if it's not, then they are not going to be able to close on the transaction. Owner of the property should be aware of that, but if not, you can always request the management company's information and they can get that information over to you. You'll notice in there then what happens if that situation arises. So the association's approval of the buyer is or is not required. If approval is required, this contract is contingent upon buyer being approved by the association no later than blank. If left blank, it's 5 days prior to closing. That's not a favorable place or a favorable line for a seller. You don't want to give a buyer 5 days up to closing to determine if they are able to purchase the property. So if you are a seller, make sure that you fix that to somewhere like 15 to 20 days, something more in line with their inspection period, because you don't want any surprises at closing. And then it continues on within blank. If left blank, then 5 days After the effective date, seller shall initiate the approval process with the association, and buyer shall apply for such approval. Buyer and seller shall sign and deliver any documents required by the association. So the gist of that, though, is that the buyer is required to get, or is not required to get, approval by the association. Be sure that you are aware of that. Make sure that you have it clearly defined in the contract at what point that is due in the transaction. Let's look at right of first refusal. What is right of first refusal? That means somebody has the right to purchase something before you do. They have the right to refuse it first before you have the right to purchase it. So that's where the right of first refusal comes from. And with a condominium, in some situations, inside the condominium docs, the condominium association may or may not have the right of first refusal, which means when an owner goes to sell the property, they can get a contract on, once they get a contract on the property, that contract then passes through the condominium association, and they can decide to step in to take the place of the buyer and fulfill the duties of the contract and pay the purchase price that the contract says, basically perform the duties of the buyer entirely as is stated, and it wipes the buyer out of the process 100%. This has to be disclosed in the bylaws of the community, but I've seen several deals be lost because associations have stepped in and picked up and used their right of first refusal. This right here, at least in our marketplace in Florida, is used oftentimes when a condominium complex is trying to turn itself back into apartments. And so what happens is they have a central investor, or maybe the investor itself already owns a majority of the units. They are intercepting the sales as they happen. If somebody wants to turn a condominium development back into apartments, you can't just go in there and throw all the owners out or demand that they sell. You can't do that. And so you got to wait for one by one that they sell their units. And so what you can do is you put in a clause inside the association bylaws that says they have they have the ability to purchase the unit, and they have the right of first refusal. So make sure that you're aware of that as a buyer. From a seller's standpoint, it's kind of a moot point. Whoever's buying it's buying it, and it's not a concern, but where that can really burn somebody is a purchaser who's not going to get approved because the association has the right of first refusal. And so this paragraph continues on and talks about the members of the association. In the second paragraph versus the association, that's a similar line to what I was talking about there in paragraph A. Paragraph C, buyer and seller shall within blank, if left blank, 5 days after the effective date, sign and deliver any documents required as a condition precedent to the exercising of the right, and shall use diligent effort to submit and process the matter with the association and its members. And so the effective date is the date that it's ratified and agreed upon by all parties. And in this situation, if left blank, 5 days is an acceptable form right there to leave as it is. And these are calendar days in our contract and not business days. So keep that in mind. These are calendar days. If within stated time period, the association, the members, or the association or both fail to provide the written confirmation or the right has not otherwise expired, the members of the association or both fail to provide the written confirmation or the right has not otherwise expired, then this contract shall terminate and the deposit shall be refunded to the buyer. So there, if this happens, the buyer is protected by that clause right there to receive their deposit back. In a transaction with a buyer, that's their number one concern. Obviously, they want to affect the transaction and move into said property, but if they can't, they want to make sure that their deposit is protected. And as a buyer's agent, that should be of utmost importance to you, is protecting the buyer's deposit. Let's move down here to paragraph E, which talks about fees, assessments, proration, and litigation. And this is something I was covering there in the last segment. Condominium association assessments are, and then the seller represents that the current association assessments are. If you're dealing with a traditional seller where the owner is still in possession of the property, they're going to know what they pay each month. But if you're dealing with a bank-owned property, the listing agent may or may not have accurate information because the owed balance may still be sitting with an attorney, and that information is tied up by the litigation, and they don't have accurate information, or you're having a hard time getting accurate information as to what the normal monthly dues are. again, I told you prior, if you purchase a property through the multiple listing service, they're going to clear the title for you and they're going to pay off that association dues, but you want to know what those regular monthly fees are. And so by going to the management company, what will happen sometimes is if it's a foreclosed property or it's with an attorney, they'll say they can't talk about the unit, it's with an attorney, all communication must go through the attorneys, and they may not even have access to what the regular monthly dues are, because it could be in a development with many different sizes and bedrooms, and they all have different monthly association dues, and they may just not know, and therefore you'd have to go to the attorney. And so that typically is handled through the agents or the closing office, again, but make sure that you understand what the association dues are, and then that goes in that line right there. Property also could be part of a homeowners association. If it was, there would be a homeowners association disclosure on top of the condominium association disclosure. That is not common in the Florida marketplace. So then let's go down here to a very important clause down here, and that is the right to cancel when you don't receive the condominium docs. Condominium docs are in place on all developments, and a buyer has a right to see those and cancel the contract if they do not like what is inside the contract. And so that's where paragraph 5 comes in. So what you're doing here in this first one, the buyer declares that they have been provided a current copy of the Declaration of Condominium, Articles of Incorporation, bylaws, rules of the association, and the most recent year-end financial information and frequently asked questions. All of that is part of a condominium package of documents. And if they have not, then they would check this agreement is voidable by buyer by delivering written notice of buyer's intent to cancel within 3 days, excluding the weekends and holidays, after the date of the execution of this agreement that they wish to cancel. So it's very important that you get those condominium docs to a buyer at execution, because if the contract executes and you don't get those to the buyer, then you are going to run the risk of having a cancellation all the way up to the close date. So I'll continue this discussion when we come back from the break. You're listening to the all new That Business Show 2.0, the real estate edition with Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes show business.
Hi, welcome to Yeagers. We just want to take a minute and show you what we're all about. At Yeagers, our primary business is hardwood flooring, although we are remodelers for kitchen, bath, and general construction. We operate a fleet of shop-at-home vans that have all the flooring type products: hardwood flooring, laminate flooring, tiles, stone, what have you. So we're able to come out first with products in our vehicles and take a look at the setting, how the colors will work, and then to be able to come up with some options and ideas for you. If that's not good enough, we have a large distribution center that we inventory product and have a nice display area.
And welcome back to the real estate edition of That Business Show 2.0. I'm Jamie Maloney, a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker based here in Tampa, Florida. And we're talking about condominiums throughout most of today's discussion, and currently reviewing the condominium rider, which is used on all contracts in which the acquisition is a condominium. And so going over the very important receiving of the condominium docs. And again, condominium docs are a requirement in the state of Florida that they be delivered by the seller to the seller's representative to the buyer, and the buyer has 3 days to void the contract at any point of the contract, even if they're past their inspection period, from the time that they receive those. So it's 3 days. Now there's a difference here with new construction, and that is they allow for up to 15 days to be able to cancel. So, but 3 days on existing units. So very important that a seller gets that property, those documents to the buyer, and then have them sign off that they have received the documents. And you can do that by updating this addendum here or drafting a separate addendum that says that they've received the documents. So condominium documents, get those to the buyer as quickly as possible. In paragraph 6, the buyer can formally request the documents. So buyer is entitled at seller's expense to current copies of the condominium documents specified in paragraph 5 above. Buyer requests or does not request a copy of the documents specified in paragraph 5. If this contract does not close, the buyer shall immediately return the documents to seller or reimburse seller for the cost of the documents. So as a buyer agent, you should always request the documents, or as a buyer, unless you live in the development and you have a copy of them already, then that would strengthen your offer to the seller in the event that it's a multiple offer situation by saying, listen, I'm already aware of the laws and the rules and regulations and the questions and the financials of this development. So please, consider my offer over and beyond the others who are not aware maybe of the situation of the development. But if you're not, though, don't assume anything. Make sure to receive a copy of those documents, and you can do so again in paragraph 6. But it's also state law, but this addendum oftentimes is overlooked by many inexperienced agents, but it does not negate the requirement that condominium docs are provided by the seller to the buyer, and with the agreement being voidable within 3 days of receipt of the documents by said buyer. Let's talk about the other components of this here. Paragraph 7, buyer's receipt of documents. This is here where you could also, this is more specific than what I said earlier. This is where you could then buy or receive the documents described in paragraph 5 above on. So you would update the contract here. You could also update it up there in paragraph 5 where I was talking about the buyer acknowledges receipt of said documents, but this is a document update since its last revision. Common elements and parking. Make sure that you know what you're buying in terms of parking spaces. Sometimes parking spaces are part of the deed, sometimes they are not, but it's oftentimes an area that is fought amongst the owners, especially in developments that the parking lots fill up at night. So this is here where you would disclose the parking that is associated with the unit. The property includes the unit being purchased in an undivided interest in the common elements and appertinent to limited common elements of the condominium as specified in the declaration. Seller's rights and interest in or to the use of the following parking spaces, garage, and other areas are included in the sale of the property and shall be assigned to the buyer at closing, subject to the declaration. And so this is where you would input any parking spaces, garage, and any other pertinent information over on this line here. Paragraph 9, inspections and repairs. The rights and obligations arising under paragraphs 11 and 12 of this contract to maintain, repair, replace, or treat are limited to the seller's individual condominium unit, and unless seller is otherwise responsible, do not extend to the common elements. And so this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, that there is a shared form of ownership in this form of purchase. And then in paragraph 10, pursuant to chapter 718, Florida statutes, buyer is entitled to receive from seller a copy of the governance forms in the format provided by the Division of Florida Condominiums, Timeshares, and Mobile Homes of the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, summarizing the governance of the Condominium Association. And so that there is our condominium development rider right there, all the different paragraphs, again, 3 pages of information that accompanies the state contract required to be inside any purchase contract in the state of Florida. There are a lot of other addendums that you would use inside a contract for sale. If it was a homeowners association, there is a HOA disclosure in Florida. That's a one-page agreement, and compared to 3 pages here for the condominium rider. But purchasing a condominium is, like I said at the top of the hour, it's like going into business with the other people inside of the building. You want to be very cautious and know about the financials of the development and know about your neighbors, because when the building needs work, you all own it together. And so condominiums can be a good investment. They can be a risky investment. It really depends. And in Florida, we really saw those kind of destroy a lot of people's financial wealth, and from the condo flippers all the way up to the people that got burned at the top of the market. And condos at their peak, they've probably lost at least 70 to 80% of their peak value. They've since recovered probably at least 50% of the lost value since they peaked back in 2005. But buyers today are, even as values increase, are very, very conservative on condos, and a lot of them still haven't recovered from the financial turmoil and the financial depths that they hit during the financial crisis, with all the units going to foreclosure. And it really put a big dent into the banks' foreclosures too, because not only did they lose on the foreclosure, they're losing on the association bill, because like I said, the foreclosure does not wipe out the HOA lien, and that survives foreclosure. It's known as a super lien, and it puts the bank in the position of having to pay that off. And then the former owner is then, absolved of the situation because the bank paid that off. Whether or not the bank goes after people after the foreclosures, after the HOAs, or for the mortgages, I don't know. I often wonder if maybe years down the road, if we'll see any type of repercussion due to the high level of default. Right now, you don't see banks going after people for the default. I think the foreclosure itself serves as that. Who knows? It's been a very unique real estate cycle that we've been in here for the last 10 to actually probably about 15 years or so, of which I've spent nearly 11 years of my professional career selling real estate. So I've seen a lot of deals, sold a lot of real estate deals, and if I can help you out in any way with real estate, I want to be your resource. So it doesn't matter where you're at in the country and listening to me on this podcast or video cast. We do have a relocation and referral network that we can partner you up with, and you can always learn more about about myself at tampabayreo.com. That site just about completed. I got to add in a few more features to it, including the real estate search functions. We just recently got up the tutorial video, but on the site we'll have a lot of resources for foreclosures and for short sales and what's available in our marketplace, because the old site really catered to letting people know what was going on with foreclosures in the Tampa Bay marketplace. The site kind of got redesigned when I first went into radio with the Jamie Maloney Real Estate Show, and began to morph into a combination of real estate and radio. Since the new sites have been developed, I've taken down the old Tampa Bay radio site. I have now developed thatbusinessnetwork.com, which is the show's specific site, in addition to tampabayreo.com, which is the foreclosure site for my business, again, with Coldwell Banker. Also, if I can help you with commercial real estate, I am beginning to work more and more with commercial real estate. Please consider me a resource for that. You can always reach out to me at 813-760-8516 for buying, leasing, or selling of commercial real estate in the Tampa Bay region. Again, 813-760-8516. My email address, jamie@tampabayreo.com. Also, selling property in Tampa Bay, please reach out to me. Now is a great time to sell. As I've talked about on this program before, in the coming years in real estate, we're going to see a more of a buyer's market and a depressing values with sellers as inventory begins to flood back onto the market due to the release of inventory from the hedge funds that gobbled up so many of the distressed properties in 2012 and 13. And so that influx of inventory is going to push prices down, coupled with the rising interest rates are going to put a damper on the real estate market. So now is a great time to sell your property. Not as great a time to buy because it's a buyer or it's a seller's market, and a lot of properties are getting multiple offers and getting bid up and over beyond the current fair market value, but not to the degree that we saw in 2005. It's a much more controlled, appreciating market. I often refer to 2005 as a hyper market because values were increasing month by month on top of one another, and it was really an unrealistic way of real estate appreciation. But again, I'm glad you're listening to this program. This is a resource for people of all areas of real estate, whether you're buying, selling, whether you're a real estate agent, or just an investor who's looking to get into real estate. Whatever it is, I'm happy to do the program, and glad that you are listening or watching from wherever that you are. If you have questions that you'd like me to address on the program, please feel free to email me, jamie@tampabayreo.com. Also a contact form over at tampabayreo.com will get you get you in contact with me as well. All past shows available on demand underneath our videos, real estate videos tab. And also on iTunes, we have the Real Estate Edition as a separate podcast in addition or separate from that Business Show 2.0, our weekday show talking with many different business professionals and entrepreneurs. So I got to wrap up the program. So again, thank you so much for listening and watching to That Business Show 2.0, the Real Estate Edition. I'm your host, Jamie Maloney, where real estate becomes show business.